What's up guys, welcome back to Gun Genesis Nature. This is going to be our first video of 2026. We wish you guys all the best and Happy New Year's.
Everybody thinks that hunting makes animals disappear, and while that is obviously the stereotype, Canada has a few animals that got more common once hunting got tied into the actual management. I'm telling you right now that the last animal on this list got so common that it started wrecking its own habitat, and that's where the story gets kind of insane. So yeah, let's get into it.
And just to be clear, this isn't a pick a side type of thing. We're just talking about the facts and what really happened. Because when an animal becomes part of a regulated system, weird things happen, such as money going into a habitat, people starting to pay attention, populations getting tracked, and sometimes the animal just straight up comes back. Starting with the first one.
First on the list, we have waterfowl. And for those of you folks that don't know, waterfowl encompasses ducks and geese. Ducks and geese are the easiest claim because they are basically a scoreboard for wetlands. Here's the simple truth. If wetlands get drained, paved, or messed up, ducks drop. It doesn't matter how much you care about ducks, they need actual nesting and feeding habitat. Now the reason waterfowl recoveries are such a big deal in Canada is because waterfowl got into one of the most organized conservation systems in North America. The big name here is North American Waterfowl Management Plan, a Canada-US partnership that started in the mid-1980s and focused hard on wetland and upland habitat that ducks rely on. It's basically one of the most famous conservation collaborations on the continent. And the hunting community is a huge part of why this became a machine. Not because hunting equals conservation as a slogan, but because waterfowl hunting is tied to real infrastructure, licensing, monitoring, and funding streams that support habitat projects. In Canada, there's a direct example of that. The Wildlife Habitat Canada stamp, also known as the duck stamp, where revenue supports wetland conservation projects through the Habitat Conservation Stamp Initiative. So what does that change on the ground? It means wetlands don't just stay as random marshes that nobody even thinks about. They become worth protecting, restoring, and managing. They become a priority, and priorities get funding and enforcement. And you see the effect in the vibe of communities too. If you've ever lived near a marsh, you know what I mean. People start watching migration like it's the season of a show. The birds are back, they're late, numbers look crazy this year. That constant attention is part of the system. Also, waterfowl are tracked hard. A lot of management decisions are built on population monitoring and annual adjustments, not just set it and forget it. That's literally the mindset built into NAWMP style management. So yeah, ducks and geese are a comeback story that's tied to habitat and long-term organization, not luck. And now we go to an animal that's even crazier, because it straight up disappeared from Ontario.
And that animal is the wild turkey. Wild turkey is one of the funniest comebacks in Canada because people act like turkeys have always been here, like they're just some part of the scenery. But no. In Ontario, wild turkeys were extirpated by 1909, completely gone. Then, restoration started in the 1980s. Ontario's restoration efforts began in 1984, and it wasn't just release some birds and prey. It involved strategic reintroduction, later on management plans, and basically turning turkey recovery into an actual project with goals. And here's the detail that makes this story entertaining. The turkeys that helped restart Ontario's population didn't come from one magical place. They came from multiple US states through transfers and contributions. Ontario's turkey management plan describes how birds from places like Missouri, Iowa, Michigan, New York, Vermont, New Jersey, and Tennessee were critical in initiating and accelerating the restoration. So what measures actually helped? These measures include reintroduction and expansion strategies, habitat considerations, and a real management plan approach, not just, look, turkeys. Now, here's where the hunting community's influence shows up in a way viewers actually care about. Once turkeys came back, they didn't get ignored. They became something people watched for, talked about, and reported on. You get this culture where sightings matter. People share where turkeys were expanding. Hunters and non-hunters both started noticing them. And the population growth got big enough that Ontario's wild turkey story became one of the province's famous conservation successes. Ontario literally describes it as a successful restoration beginning in 1984. So turkey is a comeback that went from completely gone to normal in a couple of generations. Now, let's talk about the animal where the comeback goes so hard that it becomes a problem.
The third animal on the comeback list is the white-tailed deer. White-tailed deer are not simple yay comeback stories. Deer are a be careful what you wish for story. Because in a lot of places, deer just don't recover, they explode. Why? Deer love edge habitat. And humans create edge habitat like it's our hobby. Farms, suburbs, mixed forests, chopped into patches, roads, lawns, all that. Deer eat it up, literally. So when deer numbers climb, it starts spilling into the daily life of people living in those areas. Let's talk about real-world effects. Collisions are a big one. There's a Southern Ontario deer conflict report that points out wildlife vehicle collisions increasing since 1988, and it gives a crazy stat. On average, there's a motor vehicle wild animal collision every 38 minutes, and 1 out of every 18 motor vehicle collisions involves a wild animal. Now, that report notes collision databases don't always identify species in the status, but in a lot of regions, deer are a major reason for these problems. Either way, the more deer equals more conflict link is real and well recognized. And it's not just cars. Deer overbrowsing can change forests. When deer densities get high, they can hammer seedlings and understory plants, which affects biodiversity and what the forest looks like in the long term. It's a big part of why deer are often discussed as an ecological management challenge, not just a cute animal. So what measures get used? In many places, deer management isn't just hunting deer. It's things like adjusting antlerless tags, controlled seasons, targeted harvests where populations are too high, and sometimes localized community approaches in suburban areas. This is where hunting gets framed as management, not because it's some moral thing, but because if deer get too abundant, the ecosystem and human communities feel it. Alright, now elk, and this one's got Canadian research that you can reference.
Elk are the kind of animal that makes the woods feel like the woods. And the interesting thing with elk in Canada is that some of the best documented restoration stories are super specific. For instance, Ontario has very detailed elk restoration history. There was a renewed restoration effort from 1998 to 2001 that imported 443 elk from Elk Island National Park in Alberta, which released across 4 areas of central Ontario. And the same restoration history reports that this contributed to a provincial population of about 800 elk by 2013. Now, what measures make elk restoration work? It's things such as choosing release sites with suitable habitat, long-term monitoring, controlled hunting policies once populations are stable enough, managing human-wildlife conflict as elk spread. There's also research specifically on behavior and dynamics of restored elk populations in Ontario years after restoration, which is useful because it shows that it isn't just a release and forget project. It's studied over time. And the hunting community effect here is obvious too. Elk tags are not casual. In many places they're highly controlled, limited opportunity, and very high interest. That means people pay attention, data gets collected, and enforcement matters, but it's not a free-for-all. Ontario has a government page on elk that frames elk restoration as a biodiversity achievement and discusses regulated elk hunting in the province. So elk is a comeback story where you can show receipts. They were restored, tracked, and managed, and the population built up over time. Now the last animal. This is the animal that got so common that scientists started sounding the alarm.
The last species is snow geese. Snow geese are the best example that more animals can actually be a conservation problem. Because when goose populations get too big, they're not just existing there, they're transforming the entire landscape. There's a well-cited scientific paper in Journal of Animal Ecology that talks about how the abundance and destructive foraging behaviors of snow geese can create cascading and ecological effects in the Arctic and subarctic ecosystems, including impacts on plants and broader food webs. Canada's own migratory bird regulations reporting has explicitly discussed lesser snow geese and greater snow geese being considered as overabundant, with strong evidence of detrimental habitat effects. It describes how Canada, the US, and Mexico agreed that habitat damage was a significant conservation issue and that populations were overabundant to the detriment of Arctic and subarctic ecosystems. And that's the crazy part. People hear we need to save wildlife and imagine endangered species. With snow geese, the concern becomes these birds are doing so well that they're smashing the sensitive habitats. So what measures get taken? You'll see special management approaches and targeted efforts aimed at reducing pressure on habitats. Conservation isn't always about increasing numbers, sometimes it's about preventing a population boom from damaging the environment. So, snow geese are like the proof that this whole topic is real and not ideological. It's just reality.
To conclude, some animals in Canada got more common because they became part of a system that actually manages wildlife instead of ignoring it. The habitats of waterfowl began receiving protection and funding over decades. Turkeys were literally gone, then restored and expanded. Deer got so common it started causing real problems for people and forests. Elk acquired restoration with real numbers and long-term monitoring. Snow geese became overabundant, causing a conservation issue. And that's basically it for this video. Comment down below which of the animal restorations you believe to be the most mind-blowing, and thanks for watching.